Welcome to Vault Crashers, a show dedicated to kicking down the vault door to help you find something you'll fall in love with. Our mission, our creed, our code is this: to share our passion for Vault comics in a way that makes it approachable and accessible to everyone. We want you to find a comic book or graphic novel you'll fall in love with. My name is Adair. My pronouns are she, her.
And my name is Nikki, pronouns they, them. Vault Comics, in case you didn't know, was founded in 2016 and is based in Missoula, Montana. They publish creator-owned horror, fantasy, and sci-fi comics, as well as graphic novels. And this is actually our second minisode, which a minisode really isn't just an excuse for more chaos. Today, we actually have a very special guest here to discuss the much-anticipated release of The Nasty. Welcome, Vault's co-founder, CEO, and publisher, Damian Wassel. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm Damian, pronouns he, him.
Welcome. And we'll just jump right into the questions. And the first, we must always ask this at Gatecrashers. There is like a sniper rifle trained on me if I don't ask this question. And it's very important. What is your favorite sandwich?
Yeah, my favorite sandwich, that's a really easy question to answer. It's the classic, Camembert, baguette, ham, butter. That's it. It's the perfect sandwich.
Wow.
There are lots of other great sandwiches, but it's the pinnacle of sandwich making.
Straightforward.
I respect that. And also, Nikki, what you don't realize is in Missoula, there's a lot of sandwich options too. That is something that I do appreciate about Missoula.
I'll have to visit.
My favorites have closed.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in the Central East Coast, so with lots of phenomenal deli around, and I love a good deli sandwich, but it's the classic baguette ham butter for me if I really need like comfort food in the form of a sandwich, or when I take a sandwich on a hike, just like it travels well, it's delicious, a little bit of saltiness, sometimes a little bit of sweetness depending on the ham. So
that is a really good hiking sandwich. That is so straightforward.
Yeah,
I never would have thought of that.
Not a lot of mess, which is great. And I mean, on a more messy side, but a raclette also, I feel similar components, but also delightful. And now I want one. So
now we're all hungry.
This conversation never is good because talking to Nate Gooden, I also was just like, I want a hot dog now. Like, that's all I want to eat. So
I'm too tired to be hungry presently. Like exhaustion just kills my appetite. I am not a stress eater. I'm like the exact opposite. So
stress kills my appetite.
Yeah.
So I get that. All right. So Damian, we're going to talk about The Nasty today, and that focuses on the censorship of the video nasties in the United Kingdom, and specifically like the 1970s and 80s, but more the 80s for this comic. And so working in media that's known for some explicit imagery, do you feel censorship is limiting the stories that can be created for comics?
I mean, I feel like there are two ways to slice that question. Forgive the pun in the context of talking about horror. The first is, do I see this as limiting the kinds of stories that publisher can reasonably bring to market? And the second is, do I see this stifling creativity among the creators that we acquire from? And like the answer to those two questions is like in the moment, a regrettable yes. It's a strange time to publish comics. Last year, I guess this began in 2021 and continued into 2022. In the background of the American publishing landscape, there's been a great deal of consolidation in print suppliers and a reduction in capacity in print suppliers, in addition to which, I think everybody who's sort of tangentially into books is aware that there's like a, squeeze in the paper market, and has been for a while, and in particular a squeeze in the coated paper market that's required for printing 4-color books like comics. And that's meant that the suppliers have been positioned to be choosier with the jobs that they take, and sometimes that choosiness is in service of value judgments publishers may not endorse or wish to be applied to their catalog. So we've seen that happen. That has affected some of the best-selling comics of the last several decades, books published on a scale where, it would stagger you to think that a print supplier somewhere in the country would refuse to take those jobs. Print suppliers have turned down millions of dollars worth of work to avoid, publishing scenes with gay sex in them or with characters whose religious values maybe they don't endorse. And that means when you're a publisher at our scale, it's a very real logistical concern. And we have a book come in front of us that we want to publish, but that may have content that makes it hard to get it past our typical suppliers. Now we've, spent, call it 20 months, sourcing alternate suppliers to make sure that when there's a book we want to bring to market, we have a way to do that. But even then, there are, real consequences to the bottom line for those projects because they're printed at suppliers that are more expensive on a per unit basis. And so the gross margin position on the books are just less good than they otherwise could be. And that, I think, is a deterrent for creators when they go in knowing it's going to be, even though there's a really enthusiastic audience for this, it's going to be harder to get it printed, get it on shelves. It can be stifling. And then ultimately that turns out to do a disservice to the retail market, right? Because products that they would otherwise probably have had a really enthusiastic audience for, they have a hard time getting to market now. I mean, candidly, I don't know if some of the suppliers we work with in 2023 would print Heathen, which they comfortably printed in, 2017. And that's just been a real change we've observed. Of course, running alongside that, we've seen, Kickstarter emerge as a great platform for content that might have a hard time finding its way to market with a more, traditional approach. Even then, though, I imagine some of the projects that are emerging there have a hard time finding suppliers outside the, digital 4-color printing that's available in there. You sacrifice quality for access to a print supplier. So the answer is very definitely yes. But that just makes us all the more doggedly committed to finding ways to shove that content into people's eye holes.
And we appreciate it.
Definitely.
Happy to oblige.
Nikki?
So with Vault focusing on comic genres that aren't all about capes and superpowers, what do you think it is about the horror genre in particular that has helped you find a large audience in the medium? And are there other genres you would like Vault to explore in the future?
Yeah, I think historically, horror fandom has been genre transcendent. We see horror fans follow that genre across video games, mass market paperback novels, film, television. There's a certain, I think, quality of experience one goes looking for when you go after good horror. And you, for lack of a better term, become something close to addicted to that. You want that catharsis when you're a real serious horror fan. And so that makes horror fans exceptionally easy to engage with when you put good projects in front of them. Now, horror is singularly hard to do in a comic. And one of the reasons it's singularly hard to achieve in a comic is that you can't control pacing in quite the same way that you can with other media. It's very hard to stop someone's eye from catching something that is a few panels ahead. Mm-hmm. And so you have to use page turns in very specific ways. You don't really have to worry about this when you're, producing a prose book, right? Nobody is reading 9 paragraphs ahead of where the brain just doesn't work that way, right? And you certainly don't have to worry about it when you're making a film or a podcast. Those things unfold in real time. You can't see 10 frames ahead of the current frame that's in front of your eyes. So that makes horror, I think, extra challenging to do in comics. And that, I think, makes it extra rewarding when it's done well. So I think those two things, a commitment to trying to find ways to make horror genuinely frightening on the pages of comics, and the horror audience's sort of willingness to try anything has created an opportunity for us there that, it's been a lot of fun to engage with. And, some of my favorite books that we've put out happen to be, some of our weirder horror titles. I can't help myself from rereading Passages in Black Stars Above on the regular, because that book just Like, it's done stuff that I haven't seen anybody else do elsewhere in comics in our catalog or from other publishers. And like, it's a comic that is like, keeps you in it deeply enough that you hit a point where it's just a wall of prose, you know, journal, right? And you just keep rolling right along. You've got to figure out what the heck is going on. So, with regard to genre expansion, it's funny, the timing of this call, that's something we were just talking about today. We have intention to explore some new genres, and probably to take an approach similar to how we handled the launch of horror in our catalog, which is to, you know, drop out a few titles that sit in those spaces. I should avoid commenting, I think, specifically on where we're going. But...
Fair enough. There's contracts to be signed. Yeah. Well, it's interesting though, you bringing up like film and how it's like, you know, Black Stars Above is a really great example of, I get a little nervous when a comic or a story that I've loved on a visual medium gets brought into like a TV show or a film. But I will say, like, Black Stars Above, The Autumnal, these horror stories, it's the first time I've ever been like, I want to see this on the screen too. Like, it's so visually stunning and terrifying at the same time that I would like to see it done well, but also there's like that nerve. But it's very rare that I'm ever like, yeah, I want to see an expansion of this. Like, this would be very exciting. And I think that's really special to Vault.
I think there's a feature specific to those two books that might sort of help explain some of that feeling too. It certainly helps explain it for me. And that is that they're both books that create very richly realized settings that you only get to take a thin path through. You know, I'd love to spend more time in Comfort Notch to see what's around a corner in a street that we didn't turn down in the book. And that, you know, makes me drawn to the idea that not necessarily a more expansive story, but a story with more expansive resources could be set in, you know, in the landscape of Comfort Notch, and similar to Black Stars Above. You know, I could spend a lot more time in that frozen wilderness learning what unfolds there. So those two stories, I think, they have room to breathe in their own narrative scope, and that makes it feel like there's maybe room for another gaze on the narrative threads there. And that's less the case for definitely some books in our own catalog, where the narrative is sort of more tightly buttoned down.
Yeah. I think there's something to be said about like showing, not telling everything. It leaves you wanting more. And I think that's a great thing. It's nice to not be oversaturated. And I will say that we are all very, very excited for The Nasty. The early reader copy got us all very, very excited. We talked about it. Was it our last episode?
No,
and
it was
DB Andrews' episode.
DB Andrews' episode.
And
yeah,
and we definitely went on a whole tirade about it because we were just very excited about it.
It's like, hold on, we need to talk about The Nasty. Like, this is a whole
we need
thing.
a minute. But it's such a cool concept. Has this been in the works for a while?
I think Adrian acquired that book with John Lees last year, but as I understand it, it's a project that John has been thinking about for a long time. And in part, I think that book feels so fully developed because it's set in John's hometown. Right. So, like, you know, he's from Glasgow. He knows what the streets look like. He has a feel of what it's like to be there. And so the book has a very lived in feel to me.
Definitely.
And I also think the cast of characters you're introduced to in that first issue give nearly any reader somebody that they can latch onto as their analog in this narrative landscape. I mean, for me, you know, I read that and was like, this kid reminds me a lot of me, except, you know, my imaginary friend didn't come to life at the end of the story.
Was your imaginary friend as big as his?
No, alas, no. But I think John has been exploring the themes of this book, you know, in his own thinking and some of his nonfiction writing and speaking for a long time. This is an issue that's really close to his heart. And again, I think that helps create a book that feels really richly textured, really richly inhabited by its characters. And I like loved it at the premise. I remember when Adrian had this pitch come in from John, he called me and was like, I think I'm more excited about this than anything I've seen come across my desk in a while. And he ran me through it. And I was like, that is elaborate, but I think it's pretty awesome. And so,
well, the excitement's very clear. Like it's a really exciting thing when everyone seems passionate about a project. And I will say the New York City Comic-Con panel where the art was released, I definitely had a moment where I'm like, oh my. And that and Godfell visually, I was just like, whoa, these are two such different things, but they're so like, I feel like Vault is just so special in that these two stories, very unique, very lived in, could coexist under the same publisher. And I think that's a really beautiful thing about Vault.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and I think that is a testament to the quality and breadth of creators that we've had the opportunity to work with. And we've had folks from many different corners of the creative landscape bring books to us, and that includes not only folks who are, established comics writers, but people like Daniel Kraus, who wrote The Autumnal, who hadn't done any work in comics before that book, who came to us with an idea, and I think was originally thinking, oh, maybe I'll partner with a comics writer and we'll do this together, and then he became so fixated on doing it himself. He wrote some of the most amazing scripts we've ever had come across the desk. So I think it's that breadth, that scope is all entirely due to the people who've done us the service of trusting us with their work.
For sure. And you've also made a really good home for them, which is really clear when you see artists like Sally Cantorino coming back again and again and wanting to do more and things like that. It's very cool to see the family of artists that you all have and to see like the relationships between them. Like watching Zach Kaplan and John J. Pearson talking, I was just like, they're best friends now. And I love that. And it makes you happy and invested.
I mean, heck, Lonnie and Jenna on Black Stars Above are still married. So they met on that book.
Yeah. God, I didn't realize they met on the book.
I didn't know that. Oh.
Yeah.
And now there's a little Vault baby with Matt Ehrman and Lisa Sturl. I love it. It's just the best. It's very, very cool. And everyone loves it. And we are now, we do a little thing where we make up a game for Vault employees when they come on. And so we've made up a game for you that we would love it if you would play for a moment.
Sure.
So the game is called Reviews. And we picked 3 Vault reviews, just little bits of it that were on Gatecrashers. And we want to see if you can guess which of your amazing stories it is.
Oh, okay.
Don't worry. I feel like it's not just like a quick line of like, Vault does horror well or something like that. We went into details, but yeah, we'll see. Alrighty. So I feel like this one is
We have to edit this out if I do badly.
Yeah, no,
I totally will. We'll give you the answer and I can just put it back in.
Yeah, and then you'll be like, this one.
I think you've got this.
I did try it out on one of your employees and they guessed all of them. Although one of them did write one of the reviews, which is kind of funny. The artwork brings the horrors to you visually and expertly, never giving too much and always giving these subtle hints and images that leave you sure that something isn't quite right, like a stray leaf lingering. Normally, something you wouldn't acknowledge, but as you do notice it in the story, it sends a chill through you.
It's funny. I remembered that review, so you didn't even have to read the whole thing. I remembered, some of the sentences there. That's obviously for the autumnal.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, next up. Vampires are by their nature colonial, capitalist, bourgeoisie parasites, which is why this story by an Indian English creative team that is aimed at a Western audience succeeds so wildly in making vampires truly horrific.
You're really lobbing them right over the plate for me.
I know, just like right at you.
Yeah, that's These Savage Shores, though. Obviously, different book, but Bleed Them Dry explores some themes of what vampires and colonialism might look like, too.
Yes, written by Vault's own Dan Crary. which he did not realize when I read it to him. He was like, "Oh, I like that." And I'm like, "You wrote that. You wrote that one.
Like that. Those are your words that you said
You
about
did that
book."
He's lived a life since then. All right. It starts with an ellipses because apparently, it's the creator. ... Takes us back to the time of the roaming door-to-door salesperson, traveling town to town, selling raffle tickets in support of their local volunteer fire departments. We meet an unlikely team of door-to-door salespeople as their travels take them to the most terrifying of settings, West Virginia.
You made this so easy on me. You put part of the title in that one.
I know.
That's from Door to Door Night by Night by, Cullen and the aforementioned Sally Cantorino.
Yes. No, it was on the mind. Thank you. You passed. You did so good.
I don't know what would have happened if you failed, but 3 out of 3, you got this.
Someone would have had to fire me, I guess.
I mean, I think it would have been you.
Yeah.
You would have just had to look in the mirror and be like, "You're fired."
Yeah, you would have just left the call and I'm done. Yeah, that's it.
My role is done. We would be very sad. Well done, Damien.
Thank
you. You did great, and we're very excited.
I think I'm equally excited for the release of The Nasty. That's one of my most anticipated books this year. Probably, I'm like a good parent, I'm supposed to love all my children equally, but that's one of my favorite first issues of ours I've read in a while. It really landed for me as a reader. So
yeah. I feel like people who love media to that kind of degree, you can find a lot of homes with comic book lovers, because I feel like that's a love that we understand. Thank you so much for tuning in with us. Check out the Vault Crasher episode out on February 27th for all things mindset, including an interview with Zach Kaplan and John J. Pearson. You have until March 6th to pre-order The Nasty. The first issue will be released April 5th. Damien, thank you for joining us today. If Vault's announcements are any indication, you are very busy, and we appreciate you taking your time to talk to us. All right. Nikki, you want to sign off?
Thank you so much for spending time with us. We don't have this formal.
We don't really have a sign off in general, so we just sort of dance for.
When is Nikki going to actually stop recording?
We just sort of awkwardly stare into the camera,
and then until I hit the stop recording. But I think
I could just sign off if that's what you want.
And then
Damien just closes his laptop that.
It'd be really great if you actually had a star swipe that we could do.
I could just fold the cover.
Yeah, no, that works perfect. Love it. Bye.
Bye.